you're most excited about for coaching week. So Azadeh, if I can put you on the spot, what are you most looking forward to in International Coaching Week 2022?
Well, thank you, Mick, for this awesome introduction, and hello and welcome everyone from Dubai. So what a way to kick off this week. Well, I'm really excited to learn more, to be inspired more. I'm already very passionate, but I think what really is so exciting about this week is that all of us coaches and those interested in coaching, we get to collect our passion together and inspire one another, bring our learnings together. So I'm really, really excited for all the sessions this week. And thank you, Mick, for kicking us off with this great smile. Thank you.
Oh, great smile. Azadeh, come on. You have the best smile in all of CMA. That's why I picked you out. Okay, thank you so much. Now, someone that's been very transformative in my life, I'd love to hear from Joe Lanigan. What are you interested in or most excited about in International Coaching Week 2022, Joe?
Hi, Mick. Great to see you, and thank you for starting us off with a real bang. It's wonderful, and hello to everyone. I'm also really excited about the learning. You know, we as faculty are always the ones that are doing the teaching, and now we get to sit back and do some wonderful learning, which will only add to our teaching. So very excited for this week and wonderful to see you all here.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Joe. And that shows a little bit of the international nature of this organisation. We've got Azadeh sitting over there in Dubai. We've got Joe in New Zealand. We've got Jay joining us here in Sri Lanka. There's what an amazing faculty that CMA are. And that actually enriches the learning. And I love what Joe just said, that great leaders are always looking to learn something new every day. And that's exactly the same for coaches. So you never, Ben talks about coach mastery, right? Becoming a master of coaching. You never actually fully achieve it. You're always learning something new every day. And I know even Ben himself looks to do that as well. So I want to share now with you the results of where everyone's coming from. So we've got a good chunk of students and graduates joining us. Lovely to see all of our faculty here, and a very good combination of different levels. So yeah, very balanced across core training, advanced training, and mastery. We also have different levels of credentials of people that are joining us. And it actually warms my heart quite a little bit. I lived there for 3.5 years. New Zealand came as #1 there on the Mentimeter. And Joe, can you tell me, is it 6 p.m.? No, it's 7 p.m. there.
Yeah,
7
that's right. It's 7 p.m.
All right. So thank you so much to all of our friends in New Zealand for joining us at this time. Really great to see you all. Now, a couple other announcements, and then we're going to get straight into it. I'd like to inform you that you can get some CCE certificates associated with attending these sessions. What Coach Masters ask in return is that you make a US $20 contribution to their social foundation. And I'm sharing a link in the chat right now for you to do so. I encourage you to do that regardless. Please do support that foundation. But if you'd like to get hold of those CCEs and the certificate from ICF, please do go ahead and do that. Now, without any further ado, because I'm sure you're all very excited to hear from him, I want to now introduce Ben. And he has no idea what I'm about to say, and I'm about to probably embarrass him. And if he puts me on mute at some point, we'll see. With Dr. Ben Coe, so he's the founder of Coach Masters Academy. I learn something new about Dr. Ben every week, it feels like. There's so much to this man. You will never, ever, ever find anyone more passionate about promoting the art and science of coaching. And I say those words very specifically today because of his keynote speech. You'll never find anyone more passionate about that. He works tirelessly to promote the art of coaching and the science of coaching, to get people excited about coaching, whether they be coachees or developing us as future coaches. Now, here's the bit that might put him on the spot a little bit here. He's also going to challenge you, all right? So the best way I can describe this is Dr. Ben will always push you. All right. There are times if there's new students out there that have never been through Coach Masters before, I want to tell you a few things. Learning how to become a coach is a little bit like learning to ride a bike. So you will need to do things like put some training wheels on for a while, and then you'll get pushed and you'll get pushed and you'll get pushed. And sometimes, this is the bit that he doesn't know I'm about to say, sometimes Ben himself will confuse you. He'll completely confuse you, and you'll be wondering, where on earth is he going with this? And then about 30 minutes later, you're going to have this Archimedes-like eureka moment where the penny drops and you just go, that's what he meant. And there's always an intention to the learnings that he brings every day. So if you are interested in going on a journey with Coach Masters Academy, I encourage you to dive in to the deep end of the pool, but I also encourage you that you are going to have some moments where you're challenged and you're out of your comfort zone, but there's always a reason for it. It's always intentional, and there's always a lesson at the end of it. You just need to be patient with yourself. You need to practice a little bit of self-compassion at times when you are being challenged, and the goods at the end are worth the journey. That's the thing that I'd say about Dr. Ben. That's completely off script, but that's who Dr. Ben is. He's compassionate, he'll push you, but it's worth the journey. Now, his title today, or his presentation is going to be about that thing. Is coaching an art? Is coaching a science? Is it both? And does the very fact that we even asked that question in the first place add any value or not? I mean, why do people want to pigeonhole and say, well, is it an art or is it a science? And on our CMA calls, we're often going, oh, it's an art. Oh, no, here's the science of why it works. So there's some deep learnings for us to look at here. And without any further ado, please, Dr. Ben, please share us your thoughts about coaching art and science.
Well, thank you, Mike, for such a wonderful introduction. And for all of you who are here with me today, especially people who are in Asia, well, you have sacrificed your holiday just to be with us here, to deep dive into what professional coaching is all about. And I think CMA is very honored to be able to participate in this week of International Coaching Week. I'm going to start off with a very simple game, and that is a show of hands. How many of you are married? Yeah, let's turn on the camera, give a hand. Okay, great. How many of you have who are parents right now? Show us the hands. Okay, great. The example I'm going to use today, you'll be able to identify 100%. Let me begin with this very simple statement. Getting married is fun, but having a marriage is not that fun. Agreed. Yes, the idea of falling in love is a great idea, but the consequence of falling in love is not a great idea. Well, after marriage, what do we have? We got children. Yay, welcome to parenthood. And let me just say something. We all understand the idea of parenting, isn't it? We know the importance of parenting. And we also, to some extent, understand some of the best practice in parenting. Understanding the concept of parenting is not the same as you actually doing parenting. Agree? Great. And what's the point? Well, that's the point that I'm trying to bring across here, as I want to show you my family photo. And here's my family photo. Wow. Okay. Oh, on photos, beautiful. Well, but there's a lot of story behind the photo. Do everybody agree? Great. And you might be thinking, so what's the point that you're trying to bring across here? Well, the point is this. Let me show the slide here as we begin to deep dive into the topic itself. Okay, so let's get the elephant out of the room. Okay, using the analogy that we have later on, that I'm going to bring in. What's the elephant that is in the room? We all understand that coaching works. And we know a lot about the benefits of coaching. And that's not the point here, okay? The point that I want to bring across is why it works and how it works. Just like parenting, we understand parenting is good and we know the benefit of good parenting. Putting that aside, what we are interested here right now is to deep dive into this understanding of professional coaching, as in why it works. And if it's working in this way, how is it that it produces the result that we are getting? Is this an important question? Well, it is an important question, because if we are not sure about how the systems or the engine works, then you are not in a position to be very intentional and deliberate in your executions. Now, I'm going to bring you to, and I'm going to show you a video. Okay, and I want to let you know that to answer this question, why it works and how it works, is not a very easy question. Why? Well, let's have a look at this video and you will understand why getting an answer to this very simple question, why it works and how it works, is not so simple. Okay, enjoy this video that is was actually recommended by one of our students from our academy, which I thought is an excellent video to bring this point across. Okay, so enjoy this video.
You're about to meet Michael. He lives fast as a self-made millionaire.
You didn't have to dress up. It's all right.
You're going to photograph Michael. He's actually saved somebody's life. Michael is an ex-inmate. He's a commercial fisherman. Michael claims to be psychic.
Nice to meet you.
Michael's a former alcoholic. Here's your camera. I would like you to flesh out the essence of who he is.
What would you like out of this? What would you like the photograph to say about you?
Do you find that being a psychic impacts much on your day-to-day life?
I can see this is emotional for you.
Like to get to know the person.
You've only got 10 minutes, right?
I think you're a guy that's put yourself out there. You're not hiding anything. My plan was to find out about whoever it was and to try and get that. And what I learned from him is he's incredibly brave.
It was really intense. Pull this shirt out. Sorry.
I wanted to see the nature of the person, which then present a challenge. How do you portray him as a fisherman?
That's perfect.
He's a self-made millionaire and sort of a little bit intimidating. I wasn't going for a beautiful, nice, perfectly lit portrait.
I just want to try bring out something of who you are. I think that you just treat people like the everyday people, like everybody is.
Pleasure. Thank
you.
you so much.
Well, I hope I've got that guy's bravery on film.
So it was a very intimidating environment.
So you work.
I like the empty chair next to it too.
Like, is this a totally different person?
Almost looks like 6 different people. So not everything I told you today was true. I'm not a fisherman. I am not an alcoholic. The GFC hit me hard, but I've never been a millionaire. Never been in prison. I am a Bondi lifesaver, but the story we talked about never did happen. Not psychic. Can barely spell it.
Before I knew there were different characters in each of these, I thought, that's really strange. These don't look like portraits of the character I thought you were. You always got your own preconceptions and you've got your ideas.
It pushed me into a position and a space that I wouldn't normally be in.
You have to dig a lot deeper. It means you've got to be, I think you're a lot more creative to work out how you're going to play things.
Oh, isn't that amazing? 6 photographers, 1 man, each of them eventually captured 6 different portraits of the same man. Now, you might be thinking, what's the point I'm bringing across? Remember, we started off by saying that while marriage is fun, wedding is fun, marriage is not fun. Same, we know a lot about parenting, but doing the actual work of parenting is not the same as you knowing about parenting. And the point that I'm bringing across is that many of us know what is the purpose of coaching and that coaching works. But as we step into the 21st century, the question that we want to answer is not about the purpose of professional coaching and what kind of benefit that it brings. The questions that we want is why it works and how it actually works. And to answer that question is not easy, is because we all have different contact point with the subject matters. And henceforth, our understanding about professional coaching will be the same like this 6 photographer having a different encounter with that one same man. Because of the different contact point that we have, our understanding about professional coaching will vary drastically. What do I mean by contact points? Well, it depends on, number one, are you right now an employee working for an organization? And if you are, what role does professional coaching plays in that context? That contact point that you have will inevitably shapes the way you look at professional coaching. And that understanding is very different from a leader of the organizations who are raising and working with a team of people. The way a leader sees professional coaching might not be the same as how a manager sees a professional coaching. And in the same breath, we have many different professional coaches out in the global industry, and each of us comes from a very diverse background. Some of us comes from a consultant background, some of us comes from a training background, some of us just came from a corporate world, some of us are just starting to build a career. All our contact points that we have is inevitably going to shape the way we're going to answer these questions, why it works and how it works. Just like parenting, we are not interested about the concept of parenting. We are interested in the actual applications of parenting so that we get to see the result. And that brings me to the next confusing question. Today, you have more questions than answers. Okay, we begin with this simple question, why it works and how it works, and making an attempt to try to understand this question. But this question is compounded by another set of questions, and what that is. Let's have a look at what is compounding this simple question. To answer that question, why it works and how it works, we have another set of questions that we need to figure that out. And that is, what do we actually want to achieve as the end goal? Now, back to the same question again. Each of us has different contact points, different understanding, different appreciation of the subject matters. That understanding will then inform us or influence what's the end goal of professional coaching. A manager will have definitely a different concept of what the end goal is compared to a leader, and that might not be the same as a full-time professional coach. And again, depending on what kind of training the coaches receive. By the way, do you know that there's a lot of methodology out there, ranging from brain science approach, solution approach, NLP approach. What else do we have? We have anthropological approach, and we have narrative approach, existentialist approach, and whatever that is. Look at the Google, and then you will see there's a whole range of training out there preparing coaches. And those training is going to shape the way you are looking at the angle of professional coaching. And so in order to help us to understand the thesis for today's discussion, that is bridging the science to the art of coaching, I want to work with a standard benchmark here as to what is the angle of what we want to achieve for professional coaching, so that we can reverse that questions backwards and then make an attempt to understand why it works and how it works. Is that an important question? Well, it depends whether, for example, when your car breaks down, you have two choices. First, you fix it yourself. Second, you call someone to fix it. Now, when we have an understanding of how the mechanics come together, we are in a better position to manage the thing. And that's why an understanding of why it works and how it works is the key to you being skillful. I'm not even talking about being a professional coach here. I'm talking about being skillful. Requires you to understand why it works and how it works. So the fundamental baseline that I'm going to assume to be true, or at least appreciate that we all share that as a common point as to what do we perceive as the end goal of professional coaching. Okay, first of all, there is few important key pointers that we need to accept it to be a truth, and that is professional coaching is more of a human development process. Now, having a key understanding on the concept is going to be an important factor that shapes your practice. So the key concept here is that it is a human development process. It deals with human being, not humans being problems. It's humans being. Okay, it's a human being developing themselves, not human being trying to tackle their problems. Okay, so it's a human development process and not methodology in which you do step 1, step 2, step 3. It's more fluid, dynamic in its nature. So the professional coaching is a human development process. Isn't that fun to break it down into 3 different words and then ask ourselves, what does that exactly mean? Okay, so it's a human development process, not people solving problem methodology. Okay, great. It's a human development process that involves structured, focused interactions and the use of appropriate strategy, tools, and technique to do what? What is it that we attempt to deliver here? That's a very important question. What is it that we are attempting to deliver? We attempt to deliver this as an end product, and that is to promote desirable and sustainable change. For who? For our coaching clients and potentially for our stakeholder. So 2 important concepts here. The process itself is a human development. No, it is a process about human development with the end goal to promote something desirable and sustainable change. And that brings us only more questions than answers. Because this brings us to the next question that we need to unpack. If we assume that it is a development process that's designed to promote change as the end result, then we need to study or be able to appreciate how did that actually get started? Why do people need change? Okay, and that's why we need to go back to all our coaching conversations. Look at the motivation in which they are seeking a coach. And I had this amazing privilege to study a lot of coaching conversation as part of my hobby, okay, to examine a lot of things. And one of the things that I love to examine is basically this question: what prompted people to start to seek for a coach? And I'm looking also for a comparison study with the reason people, the reasons that propel or encourage people to seek a counselor, a psychotherapy, and a coach. And I'm not just asking for a reason, I'm looking at the transcript, the conversations that that transpire between the person and the practitioner, may it be a coach, a counselor, or a psychotherapy, and examined the way the way people encounter their situation. To begin with, there must be something that happened. Agreed? There must be something that happened. And that's what I'm interested to discover. What's the nature of that thing that happens that triggers this encounter with the practitioner? At least based on my studies on those coaching conversations. Now, I have not yet contrast that with psychotherapy and counselor, but I will certainly love to get a hands around those data. But based on what I have around the coaching conversation, I can convincingly say that this is exactly what happened. Two things as a phenomena. Okay, phenomena means things that happens and you can observe. And what I'm observing here is not the physical manifestation of the behavior, but more in looking at the transcript that transpire between the person and the coach. And my conclusion is that there are two things that happens here for anyone who started to reach out to a coach. And that is number one, stagnance, and number two, standing still. Now, what's the difference between the two? Well, number one, stagnance. Stagnance is a way to describe people going around and around and around. Okay, they make a few attempts, but somehow they just cannot get themselves. So that they met something like a problem that kind of like blocked them, and they're not able to take themselves out from that blockage. Okay, so or there's something that is pulling them back to doesn't permit them to move forward. So this is one particular phenomena that triggers people to start to step into this space to find help from a coach. Now, standing still is a little bit different from stagnance. Standing still has a lot to do with there is no barrier or no so-called problems that blocks the people. The path forward is almost clean and clear. It's like they can take off anytime. However, they are just not sure how things are supposed to be. As in, they know that they need to move forward, but somehow they cannot put their hand or their fingers around it and say, this is what it is. So these are the two typical phenomena that happened when people step into the space to find help. Is that important? Well, certainly it is important, because just because you have a fever doesn't mean you eat Panadol. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? Just because people are coming to a coaching conversation and they present a problem or a challenge, it doesn't mean that it is always the same. Like fevers have a different range of fever. Is a spiking fever? Is a consistent fever? What other symptoms accompany the fever? Those insights allowed you as a practitioner to laser sharp into the issue to bring about a greater impact as a result of this intervention. So far, so good? Great. When someone is standing still, the way you coach them is not the same as someone who is stuck. Do you understand the point? Great. So the nature of the situation presented by our clients has at least two different sides, stuckness and standing still. What I'm interested also is, another question is, what's the conditions, not what's the cause? Okay, what's the surrounding conditions that contribute to such a observer phenomena in the in the conversation as they talk to the coach about their situation? I start to notice that there are four very interesting things that could happen here. What are the four interesting conditions that contribute to people stuck and stand still? Well, I like to call them as number one, blind spot. I think those who drive, you understand, there are just some aspects or some area that we just cannot see. Okay, but it doesn't mean it's not there. It is there, but it's at this point of time, I am not able to see it. So that could be a blind spot, or we invented a new word which get our faculty members scratching their head all the time, a blank spot. Some of you might be thinking, okay, what's the difference between a blind spot and a blank spot? A blank spot means it's blank. Blank means nothing. Nothing is not the same as blind spot, which means you cannot see. A blank spot means you can see and it's nothing. Do you understand what I mean? Okay, great. So what causes people to be stuck or stand still? It could be number one, due to blank spot or blind spot. That's just the beginning part of what makes it so complicated. Oh, by the way, human beings are not so easy, by the way. If you are married, you understand that getting to stay together is really both an art and a lot of science behind it. Okay, good. So what makes it complicated here is that apart from blank spot and blind spot, we have a potential enemy that's called the resistance. Resistance occurs because something within the internal systems is in conflict, and henceforth the defense mechanism is triggered that creates either a pull or a negative push towards a certain behavior that is not constructive towards achieving the intended goal. And then apart from blind spot or blank spot, there are some spots that is distorted. Okay? That means they can actually see something, but they choose not to see it, or they choose to see it with a different lens towards it. Okay, so these are the potential contributing conditions that created this phenomena of people remaining stuck or stand still that compel them to start to reach out to work with a coach. And what we are interested as a coach is to be able to find that sweet spot. Okay, now that's another way to say coachable moment. Okay, we want to find that sweet spot. Do you know what sweet spot is? The favorable spot that brings great delight to your heart. Okay, what we want is to be able to identify that sweet spot, and it's not that obvious. Okay, just like in your dating, okay, you just have to work hard to find what's the sweet spot. Right, Jennifer? And when they're able to get the sweet spot, oh, that's where you see romance. But if you don't get the sweet spot, you understand what you will get. You got it? So in the coaching conversations, the coach attempt to support the clients to be able to come to this sweet spot. And when we're able to identify the sweet spot, and that's where facilitating the actions becomes meaningful. And ICF, in his new revised ICF core competency, has changed that to facilitating action and growth. And it is important for us to have a healthy perspective of this competency. Part of cultivating growth, okay, is to enable meaningful, insightful actions that leads people to a true sense of happiness, fulfillment, progress towards something that is important. In a nutshell, what are we trying to say here? The actions is not to be taken for the sake of having an action steps. The actions is arise as a result of a meaningful discussions of what really is important and what's my understanding and perspective of my situation after the entire exploration, discussion, reflections, examinations, a thoughtful look at the situation. And that's where we use that emergent understanding to decide what's the way forward. Now, getting an action without an understanding or a deep insight, as we always say that in CMA, it is only a temporal fix around the situations. What makes humans a better human being is our capacity to think and learn. And we see every encounter includes the way the clients encounter their situations. It might be a situation of stuckness, a situation of stillness, a situation in which is blank spot or blind spot or resistance or distortion, doesn't matter. Those are encounter, important encounter in which we can seize that moment to turn it around, freeze the time. I love to freeze the time. How many of you likes, oh yeah, lady loves this concept of freezing the time. I freeze the best moment of my life where I am at the glorious day and that doesn't move. Okay, what we want is to capture those interactions. Take it in this current moment, freeze it so that nothing moves, and allow our clients to be able to travel back in time to look at that moment in time and gain an insight and understanding from that frame and draw out a gem, a wisdom. Do you believe that life has a lot of wisdoms for us to pick it? Yes, there's a lot of gems like Magda love that pearl necklace. Yes, she picks from every pain in life and then turn that into a precious necklace. Some of us chisel off the unpolished diamond and make it shine. So there are a lot of wisdom that is trapped in those moments, waiting for us to freeze, return back, and have a second look. So having said that, let me move on to another more question here. There's more questions to be answered. There are more questions than answered. Now we understand, okay, the nature of the situation presented by our client is not so straightforward as in, I don't know, I want to have some action steps. It's not as simple as that. We all now understand. Putting that aside, we are now confronted with another more complex question. And what's that complex question? Well, let's have a look. The complex questions right now is, what's our concept of change? I love to run a poll or runs a questionnaire, with just only one question, and that is, in less than 20 words, tell me what is change. Okay, and you will be amazed by the kind of response people give it to you. Okay, change means change. Change means change. Okay, yeah, what is change? Change means you give me $5, I return you back 50 cents. That's called change. That's a change. Okay, well, that's part of it. Okay, what else can you tell me about change? Change means change lah. To change. Okay, now because we have limited language or capacity to describe these subject matters, and henceforth our executions are not as impactful as it is. Now, as we have talked up to this point of the conversations, we now begin to realize that, well, the nature of situation is important, but what is really so critical right now is for me as a practitioner to be able to articulate what's the concept of change that I am delivering to my clients, bearing in mind that the nature of situation is complex for them. When I'm able to have a better insight on the concept of change, I can reverse that backward to begin to understand how the process of change work, so that I can now create a much more meaningful interventions to bring that into fulfillment. Now I'm going to present to you my own concepts of how I see change. And I see that as a spectrum. They evolve as we begin to understand change differently. Well, just like your marriage, isn't it? Of course, you love your wife, your spouse, that is love in the first sight, but marriage is only more at the later stage of the year. Isn't that true, Joe? Isn't that true for those who are married for 20 over years, and you only say it only gets better as it ages, just like a wine. Okay, the older it gets, the more dear and expensive that is. And so in a similar way, the more you understand the concept and the nature of change, the more you can offer to your client. So allow me to walk you through this spectrum of change that grow with your understanding. So this is something new, but at least much better than 2 years version. 3 years ago, when I attempt to share that to our faculty members in our retreat. Okay, this is a little bit more refined version. Okay, great. So in this diagram, you might want to take note of a few important metrics first. The one that is horizontal is called newness. How new is this approach, or is this execution? Another metrics is creativity. Okay, how creative is this? Okay. Change begins at the most fundamental understanding, where the concept of that change at this level is simply to fix something or to resolve something. Now, to fix something, is that the same as to resolve something? What's the difference between fix and resolve? Well, fix imply that something is broken, so you mend it back. To resolve doesn't necessarily imply that something is broken. So far, so good. But we do know something is not functioning accordingly to the specifications. So far, so good. So something is broken or something that is not producing the optimum results. So in this concept of change, the practitioner approach is simply to fix or to resolve. It will not go beyond the execution of fixing and resolve if the practitioner concept of change is to fix or to resolve. That means something is either broken or something is not getting the optimum result. If that's how you understood the world, then your approach is fix or resolved. So that is a saying, I'm not sure which country actually say that if there is a nail sticking out, we just hammer it down. Okay, do you understand that? Great, because that's how you see the world. Nail sticking out, hammer it down, bang. Okay. As we begin to take time to start to understand and appreciate the concept of change, our understanding moves to the next level. Or as we get mature, we begin to see change as not something to fix or resolve. We are able to, especially when we get to work, okay, and we get promoted and we are given more leadership responsibility, that somehow created a new outlook of things. Instead of looking at things to fix, we look at how can we replace it with something else. Now, can you see that the concept of change right now is a little bit more elegant compared to the first fundamental understanding of fixing? And in the same way here, instead of looking at things that we want to resolve, we are looking at how can we modify it. Now, as you can see, to be able to execute an intervention of change that is about replacing something or modifying something, it takes creativity a little bit higher versus you trying to fix, which is trying to mend something, or trying to resolve something. So far, so good? Great. And what I'm very interested about is that the thing that you are able to produce as a result of replacing and modifying is a little bit more than what you try when you fix and resolve. Let me just pause here for a while. And I'm going to give you just a couple of seconds to think about your coaching conversations, your attempt to work with your clients as they present the situation to you. I want you to start to remember, your general slant when you're making inquiry or when you're trying to reflect back to your client. Why? Because those are very good data points for us to have a look at what is powering up those systems. Like, for example, when you reflect back something to the client, that shows where you're paying attention to. It's either whether you're conscious or you're unconscious. But by studying what you're paying attention to, we can roughly figure out what your intent is. So look at your coaching conversation and try to reflect and see, what is it that you're trying to address here? Is it trying to fix something, resolve something, replace something, or modify something? Okay, great. While being able to replace something and modify something seems to be more powerful than we trying to fix and resolve something, there is a space in which we can do a little bit more here, which is an extension of something that is not exist. And that's where we step into this entire space called generative. Now, what is generative capacity? Generative capacity is the ability to produce something that doesn't exist. Exciting? Yes, like producing children that doesn't exist and they exist and they are unique in this planet Earth. And when I look at children, I'm so amazed that, wow, they can think, they can speak, they have emotions, they have their own personality. They are just amazing. How many of you are parents when you first carry the baby that is, only fathers can do that, okay? When, fathers, when you look at the baby for the first time, just, what's that? Just remember, my first question was, what's that? Right, it's so amazing. These are miracles, miracles of life. We bring life to a planet Earth. And the possibility of what this individual can do to this world is unknown, waiting to be uncovered. And that's the kind of space that we want to be able to step into in our coaching conversation with our client, that we want to go beyond. I'm not saying that we cannot, but we want to go beyond fixing and resolving, stepping into a place of replacing and modifying, and if possible, to this place in which we can have an extension of something from the point of reference. And that's where we step into the concept of change, where it involves adding something and being able to create something. And as you can see in the graph here, that being able to add something and create something, it produces more creativity to the end product of the result that you have produced. And the result that you produce is absolutely have higher degree of nuance. And if you look at the spectrum here, change would involve maintaining something to keep it as what it is, as its original point, or we're looking at improving it to leading that to the last one is I have not found the word to try to call that. So I'm just going to leave it blank for the time being until I can find a suitable word to talk about that. But what I have at this point of time is development, but I don't feel very, comfortable with this word. And I don't feel that development is what it is. This is all about. So I'm just going to leave it blank for the time being. So in terms of the process level, it's about restoring something and moving that to renewing or re-engineering the process. And because the last word is not born yet, I'm going to keep the third circle as something going to be unfolding, okay, as I get the inspiration. What amazed me here is that as I begin to look at the concept of change in the spectrum, or in this spectrum, okay, just to finish this out first. So when we look at the concept of change, we want to make a distinction, a very clear distinction between coaching someone to facilitate designing actions from coaching someone to facilitate learning, which is focusing on the person. And what I surprisingly discover is that as we begin to move towards the upper end of the spectrum, it actually increases our capacity to create generative change. And there was a very old science called the U theory that basically talks about letting it go and letting it come. And what it basically does is that as we want to step into this capacity to generate generative change, a lot of it depends on the practitioner thinking systems. That as the practitioner learns to let go of concrete logic and allow wisdoms to land, and that's the analogy of letting it come. We begin to see a bigger systems. We begin to see something that is actually not visible with our naked eye. Okay, and that's when we step into this transformative space in which we can see the thought process, perspective, and values. And we begin to see things like a 3D model rather than a very linear step 1, step 2, step 3 kind of concept. That's the kind of space that will usher in a much more richer change effect or change outcome. Right now, I'm going to show you real time, real life, how complex the nature of the client situation is, how the client is stuck or stand still. And then we're going to take a look also, as we begin to see this, how real that is when our clients is stuck, we then are able to appreciate that the kind of change that we want to offer is indeed not so easy. Okay, so this recording, this conversation is a very fresh recording that I just happened to get hold of it last week. And it's such a great, real example of how our clients actually experience their situation, where they need help from a professional coach. As you listen to these coaching conversations, try to envision how the client is encountering the situation that she is in, and then appreciate what is going through behind this client's mind as she talks about her situations. Okay, so let's enjoy this conversation.
I would like to talk to you about my current.
Sorry, let me just reshare that again.
I would like to talk to you about my career aspirations today. So I know for sure at some point in time, I am going to change my career. And I've been thinking about this, and I guess that everybody knows that coaching, I'm thinking about going into coaching if I can in the next few years. And I guess that I'm excited about that, because I guess that when you're in your 20s, right after university, you do a job and you don't know what's out there. But I think this next thing that I do, you know about yourself more, and it's more intentional. But I've also made a decision, or I kind of think that I want to still live in the corporate world, maybe about 5 years, a little bit now. And I guess that, but then I realized that I haven't really thought through how I want to spend those 5 years. Because I think there's many ways to think about it. You're only there for 5 years. Just do it. Or, you know, do you kind of max what you can get out of it while you're there? And now I really have to, I think that I need to really think about it now, because interestingly, in the past 2 weeks, 3 good job opportunities came to me. I haven't nailed them yet, but they're very good roles that would that are more, I guess, more advanced roles than what I currently do. And I wanted it to take a moment to kind of remind myself or crystallize what I really want to get out of it, because it's going to be challenging and everything. and also how I want to what do I want, how do I want to spend those next years until I finish my corporate role? Because I guess that I'm feeling that I haven't really thought it through, what my next step would be. Why I'm not starting now? Am I still kind of trying to be staying in this corporate role? Of course, the salary is one big component, but then is it only for the cash? I think that being in the corporate role for the long time, for a long time, I don't think that for me personally, whether I become the most senior manager, or does it really matter that much to me on a personal basis? Not really, but I see myself still wanting to do a good job, wanted to excel. I guess there's something in the corporate world I still want to achieve, and I don't think I've achieved that yet. I feel that I might be a little early, a little bit to leave the corporate role. And also, I guess that I'm a little worried. I guess I'm repeating myself about the income part as well. So I see that what I'm trying to do maybe at this moment. I'm kind of feeling that, and I need to organize my thoughts.
Wow. What can I say? Our clients is so beautiful, isn't it? As in, I mean, that's the reality, of what this professional is all about. People with such a nature of, this is the kind of conversations that you will be dealing with. Yeah. So I'm curious to find out from you, as you listen to this client presenting her story, what's your thought about it? Anyone would like to break the ice and just share? What's your thought about that? As you hear the kind of story that she's presented, there's a lot of things that's going through your mind right now, right? Okay, as you're listening to the story, what's the problem? What's the issue? Maybe this, maybe that, blah, 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 right? Great. So just talk to me for this a couple of moments. As you listen to this story, what is it that, what's the first thought that popped into your mind? Go for it, David. Is that David? David, go for it.
Hello there, thank you. Just one thought. My first thought was, of the options, which one is going to take her on the journey that she wants to go?
That's a good one. That's a good one.
Which is the best one to go on that journey?
Yes, that's a good one. That's one way of us looking at, when we're listening to the story. And there's nothing right or wrong. It's just simply saying that this is how you're looking at it. And this is how you're processing the client's story. What's the best way here for her, right? Great. Anyone else? What stood out for you? Go ahead, Louise.
Yes. Okay, she seems still and stuck with a purpose. I mean, the purpose of what is next. She's
standing still, being stuck in the quicksand. That if she don't quickly get out, she will be swallowed up by the quicksand. Okay, so that's good perspective. How about Fiona? What's your thought?
I believe she's made a decision.
Okay.
And she's trying to understand how to best leverage her time in the corporate world in order to transition.
Well, Fiona is looking at what's the bottom line. It was the main bottom line here. Okay, it's to understand something and move forward. Well, that's one way to look at it. Okay. Now, do you want what what's the thing that stood out for me as I was listening to the story? Honestly speaking, what's your problem? What's the issue here? That was what I'm curious about. What's the issue here? What is it that you're struggling here? What is it that is holding you back? Like she's holding on to something and not letting it go, right? So all of us, to some degree, has our own way of looking at the nature of the situation that is presented by our client. Now, inevitably, the way we see the problem situation that is presented by the clients is going to inform us or inform you on the way you're going to tackle it. So far, so good? Good. Because in an intervention, when we are doing an intervention or we are trying to step in to help someone, we consider we do consider a few important factors. One of the factors is the nature of the situation. Either you're conscious or not conscious. But from a practitioner point of view, in creating a process framework, I will be taking into consideration the nature of the situation. The question is, how do you define that? Do you define that based on your own understanding, or you're defining that understanding based on a body of work that has been carried out, so that the way you're looking at it is an informed, objective way of looking at the subject matter? And that's part of my research work that I'm curiously, constantly, enjoying. Okay? As in, it's so fun, isn't it, to just examine the different way in which people present their situation and draw out, extract out main characteristics. And then from that characteristics, we take a look at the different process framework. That means when you apply a logical thinking or reflective thinking, or you try to do other ways of techniques, we want to take a look at how the mind shift, how the mind of the clients move, or how the conversation move, right? From all this research work that I gathered, I then now understand one very important concept. Giving space for our clients to talk is good, but not very impactful. Now, it is impactful from a point of view of a friend-to-friend conversation, having people to air out and get whatever that is burdensome off their chair, off their chairs or off their system, so that they feel a little bit lighter. That is offering them a psychological safe space in this moment to breathe a little bit. But in terms of being creative in structuring an impact for them to see a change outcome, having a spacious space to talk about it is only the prerequisite, but it does not really impact the change outcome directly. And henceforth, it doesn't speak of the practitioner as skillful or masterful. So far, so good. And what I'm advocating right now is that we can bridge that with science, and allowing science for us to use that space to be able to facilitate and direct a process that directly interface with the way of thinking to make the necessary change. And it is with this that I'm going to bring you to the main thesis of today's presentation. And that is, how is science an answer for us to create powerful generative change? Now, when we come to this point of where professional coaching is, we need to understand that every one of us are in an equal capacity to coach someone, right? And that depends on really your concept of coaching. And that concept of coaching will therefore inform you about your end result. Now, some of us is able to coach another person based on experience, Well, some of us has years of leadership experience. Your experience inform you about certain wisdoms or certain way of looking at things that you can use to help another person to see it. That certainly has value, but that is just only one aspect of being able to offer powerful change. Well, how many of you knows a little bit about medicines? Well, at least when I was in Kazakhstan or in that part of the world, they self-medicate themselves. Okay, the knowledge of how to, what medicines to eat or what to do when your kids is sick or whatever that is passed down from mother to mother. And one of the topics that mother usually talks is about, what medicine do they do? And what medicine do they give when the kids is this or try this medicine versus that medicines and whatever that is. Those are accumulated or gained through experience that is passed down or accumulated. Do you trust yourself to a doctor who gained his license by experience? Oh, it depends on how sick I am. If I'm just having a stomach ache, I do not mind to go to someone to just get some pills or get some advice. But we're talking about professional coaching here, in which we want to bring about generative change, and experience is good, but not sufficient. So that's where one part of the culture, one part of the equation is experience. You need to have experience, but experience is only one part of it. The second part of it is methodology. Yay! Who doesn't like methodology? Tools box, step 1, step 2, step 3, do this, and you get the results. Wow, it's easy to learn, isn't it? Just follow instruction. Well, there is a place for tools and methodology, but the best conversations is a conversation that is born in the moment from the felt experience. Agreed? Certainly you do not want to go for a date where your date planned everything. Now we should finish our dinner in 5 minutes and we're going to walk the park for 15 minutes and we'll get into a movie theater and watch the movie for 2 hours and we're going to eat popcorn and Sprite. Right? So there is place for methodologies and tools and steps, but that is only to bring structure to the process, and the structure itself cannot replace the dynamics of the process. And that's where science now becomes an important component to make the experience and the tool a little bit more robust and adaptive. And professional coaching has arrived at a point in which we know that it works. We know the benefit and the purpose of it. And now we have to show the world how it works. Like a doctor stepping into the world to let them know that's the science behind why the medicines is able to address or treat a certain symptoms. And it is based on this knowledge that people will have confidence in the medicines. And that's where professional coaching is standing at this point of time. That I'm not saying that experience and tools and steps are not important. Those are important, but we need to keep in touch with the evolution of the industry. Are you following my chain of thought? I dare not dare to proclaim, but I personally believe the 4th generation of coaching movements. Is it the 4th? Yeah, we talk about the 3rd generation, which is basically a thinking capacity, whereby we leverage on the ability to learn. On the 4th generation of professional coaching, I am seeing, or I hope to see, that the professional coaches will embrace the science into their practice. Why? Not because we have to, because it matters. Why it matters? We're working with human beings. If psychotherapy were to commit themselves 2 years of studies in order for them to be able to deliver what they do, I do not see why professional coaches should be fall short change of that education. I believe that is a place for professional coaches to be supervised in terms of the deep work that they're working with the client. Why? Why? Because people matters and people is complex. Got it? So with that in mind, that is my proposal, that a coaching conversations, if to be transformational, has to be a facilitated, is a facilitated, dialectic, and a reflective learning process. Why is it that professional coaching needs to be so complicated? It is complicated because of the very nature of the encounter that triggers or prompted people to seek help from a professional coach. We can see that in that recording, where we hear the clients presenting their topic to us or the situation, there is a complex systems that is working at the back of the client's mind. Is the client conscious about that complex system? Well, apparently, I don't think so. That complex systems that is working at the back of the client's mind creates a perceptions that the client has no idea. The clients at that moment simply talks about how I remember what the situation is. It's a memory of what had happened. And that memory is now given an oral form, which is called oral communication. That is a very raw content. In that raw content, which is oral in nature, it's up to you and me right now, depending on what discipline you are coming from, how we look at that. If the way we are trained sees that oral content as facts of information that I need to analyze, the intervention will only follow that change of process. But if I look at that oral presentation as a story, that's different from looking at that as a fact. And henceforth, for professional coaches, or for people who want to step into this space of professional coaching that deliver deep transformation or be able to create generative change, these people need to go for a heart surgery. Okay, seriously, a heart surgery. Okay. We need to put a heart back into the system. Why? Because most of professional coaches are actually working in the corporate for many years. And that's something very interesting about these professions, that we don't have a 21 years old fresh grad who step out and say, I want to be a professional coach. Agreed. Now, as we scan across the room with great respects, you all know, except for one or two individuals who may started it much early, but they are rare. Okay, like Sarah, who has started very young at the very tender age of less than early 20s. But for vast majority of us, we make a very deliberate, intentional choice to switch. I'm a project manager turns a program consultant to a personal development trainers into finally downgrade myself to a professional coach. Okay. So we make a very deliberate switch from a past operating systems. We all know to be leader-centric, but we only say leader-centric, but lack of the capacity to be leader-centric. So in this coaching process, we need to have a heart transplant to switch our mind to see the content as a story, a beautiful story that has a lot of gem for us to unearth. And that's where we can appreciate the science of narrative psychology, existential psychology, that focus on very key elements of here and now. And that the here and now is an extension of the self. And that as an extension of the self is being portrayed out in what we call a narrative. And in that narrative, we can extract a lot of precious data. And the extraction of those data requires a different way of looking at the content. And that's why students in the first level, I hear two things: subject matter with you, such a simple concept. This takes at least 3 months to get used to it and not even master it. And they only then move into the advanced training, then begin to figure out, oh yeah, the who of the clients, and still lack of the language to fully identify it. Even when they step into the third level, when they get to see a much more fuller spectrum of the who, they are still trying to recognize what on earth is a perception. Do you see what I'm trying to say here? It is a science of its own, where a doctor trained himself to learn to recognize the symptoms and be able to identify it as soon as possible. That this approach requires faithful, diligent study of the work itself. And that is to examine how our clients present their situation to us. It's not just a description of what had happened. It's a way of showing us how the systems of thinking compound together to form a perception that is not fully crystallized for the clients, and requires the coach to be able to draw out something. That is just only the simple step, drawing out, and then you got a whole chunk of content in front of you. You now have to figure out, how am I going to categorize this meaningful content? And that's where the concept of framing it becomes an important study here. Are you able to frame that in according to an element? Now, elements is a higher category of details. When we are able to see a higher category, what happens to the way of looking at things? A much higher perspective. For example, cars, lorry, motorcycles, what are they? These are vehicles. What's above vehicles? Transportations. What's above transportation? Infrastructure. So as we are able to see things higher up and reflect it back to our clients, their way of thinking now elevated. And when you're elevated, things becomes more like a 3D model rather than a flat 2-dimensional perspective. These are all signs that influence the way perceptions are created. 1D, 2D, 3D, 4D, are they the same? What D dimension? 1D dimension, which is a dot. 2D dimension is a line. 3D dimension is a square. A 4D dimension is a triceps. The more that we're able to see in terms of the dimension, the richer is our perspective. And to be able to achieve that, we have to learn to do frame. Right? So those are the signs that help us to leverage on the space that we have offered to our client. So here's the beautiful part of how a science helps to bridge the art of coaching. And when I say the art of coaching, I'm looking at how we speak to our clients. I love the way Joe and Sarah and our friends in New Zealand, how they are able to communicate in such a gracious, compassionate way, which I kind of like say, wow. Okay, those are art. These are just a way of doing things that is natural to you, that create this wonderful space of feeling good, okay, of that the freedom in it. But what we want here is to be able to bridge that with a switch and looking at the content from a fact to a story, a details to a thought process. And that's where in CMA, our approach of coaching is to train our students to consider the experience of our client. How is it that they are relating to the situations, and then captured the element and using the skill set of reflecting it back in a, I don't want to use the word scientific way, but in an empirical way of you, verbs, subject matter. And that skills, when you can deepen that with your knowledge of the nature of things that people is talking about, that's where we can offer a deeper impact to our client. So in conclusion, why am I advocating? Why am I encouraging you in this International Coaching Week? I would like to encourage all of us, irregardless of whether you are a manager who wanted to learn coaching skills to be able to help your direct report to be able to manage their situation better, or you are a leader who is working with a group of people or individual people, helping them to become a better individual, or you are a professional coach wanting to offer a much more richer and meaningful change. That's the transitions that I'm encouraging you to make from a pragmatic approach that is based upon your experience or learned techniques or tools, to transition that to more of an empirical approach whereby your execution is informed by a body of knowledge around the nature of things. So we want you to be able to transition from where the coach depends on your expertise and the experience of tasks. Okay, now, do you understand this? That even as coach, we can depend on the expertise and experience of the subject matters that they are dealing with. Okay, so we depend less on that, and we want to depend more on my knowledge and understanding of the nature of things or the process itself, like the process of change. What does science teach us about the nature of change? Thinking, learning. What does science tell us about the nature of thinking and learning? So as we deepen our knowledge and understanding around all these subject matter, our conversation becomes much richer rather than experience and expertise. Greater interest in actioning. I'm not saying that those are not important, but the actioning is supported by the learning experience of the clients, able to draw out emergent understanding from the clients in the process that fuels the actioning. Rely on models, tools, and techniques. I'm not saying that you don't do that. There are great calls out there that will give you a greater structure to the process. And if you need them, by all means, go for it. But what I'm advocating, that as much as you like to eat McDonald's, don't eat McDonald's every day. Okay, keep a healthy diet where you learned to depend on your ability to observe and listen, where you learn to cultivate deep presence, where you learn to notice how are you noticing your own thought, how are you thinking, what are you paying attention to, what is arising for you, what is dropping for you. Learn to depend on this natural skill set. So that's my encouragement to all of you with this ultimate goal that we all aspire to offer generative change that is more colorful, change that will impact the individual a little bit more than just helping them to tackle the situation. With that, high five! Whoa! Let me see whether I have time for one video, and let me have this one video to encourage you. Singapore is going through a major change in education since 10 years ago, and I think a lot of countries are all doing that to shift away from a conventional way of teaching our kids. We are a recipient of a model that happens in 1970s, where getting the right answer, having the knowledge is the key towards become successful. Agreed? Great. So there is a shift in how children, a shift in the education. And I thought that kind of shift is also equally important for us as we consider our coaching education, which I'm glad that ICF switched over from coach training to coach education. And I only wish that 60 hours is just only the prerequisite for you to begin your coaching education. That the minimum as an entry point for all professional coach is minimum 200 hours. No, okay. Let's watch this video, as a closing, and then I'll pass it quickly over to Mike for a time of dialogue sessions.
Applied learning is getting our kids to go beyond the classroom. Whatever knowledge they have acquired in the classroom, use it in the real world. Some may find science to be dull, mathematics to be boring, English to be tedious, but when you give them that space to express themselves, whether through the arts or through a project like robotics, you see the sparkle in the children's eyes. It anchors their passion for learning. Passion drives lifelong learning. It's critical for our schools to inculcate this very tacitly into our curriculum, into our CCAs, but what we call the applied learning programs and spaces, so that it becomes part and parcel of learning. Classroom learning remains important because it's the foundation where we can build applied learning upon. How we can improve our school system is getting the kids to get active out of the classroom, show what they have learned. Most importantly, champion their own learning throughout life when they are outside of our schools. And parents, with their pastoral role, help children make the connections of what it means to actually learn. Not just grades, but getting the whole learning journey in place where children enjoy learning, own their own learning, and be able to express what they have learned. I would want our primary schools to have ALPs by 2023 so that they can learn in the full continuum of holistic education.
Great. So you understand why in CMA we strongly believe in continuous learning and continuous enrichment program, because lifelong learning is a way for us to be a professional that will serve our clients. And as we begin to learn, we begin to offer a greater depth to our client. So with that, thank you for being with me in this wonderful afternoon. And I'm quickly going to pass the time over to Mike for him to facilitate a dialogue sessions. While we are doing that, you can go to the chat box and share with us, what are you taking away from this learning sessions? So with that, I'm going to hand over the time over to Mike. Mike, back to you. Thank you so very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ben. Can I please ask everyone to give a big round of applause for Ben, please? Absolutely wonderful today. Now, Dr. Ben, I hear 271 things, and I'm going to summarize them back to you now. No, jokes aside, just quick process check, Ben. How long would you like for the question?
Maybe we'll have another 20 minutes for the dialogue session and for those who need to adjourn off, by all means, you can move on. But for those who have questions or thoughts or things that, go ahead, Mike.
Perfect. Okay, thank you so much. So let's work on that 20 minutes. If you'd like to raise your hand and ask your question live, that is our preference. We'd love to see you. We'd love to hear from you. Alternatively, you can use the Q&A function that's at the bottom of your Zoom screen right now, and I'd be delighted to read out your question for you if you would prefer that. But we do like to hear from you. So I'd prefer if you opt for the raise your hand, but it's really up to you. And when I say raise your hand, use the digital raise hand feature in Zoom so that we can see you. Now, as people are formulating their questions, Ben, I'd like to get us started. I did warn everyone, by the way, that there would be moments in this talk where we would be confused and we'd be going on a tangent and we weren't sure where it was going to go. But I told you to be patient and to be self-compassionate with yourself if you were confused, that it would get there. And it certainly did. And it paid off huge dividends today. So thank you, Ben. And this balance between understanding the science of why coaching works, and then understanding that it can be artful as well. That's my biggest takeaway today. And it makes me reflect on how well the CMA programs are structured. In that core program, understanding the science and getting your hands on that steering wheel and going through handle questions, et cetera, before actually unlearning some of that, to then learn even deeper science and more art as you go along. So it really penny dropped for me many times today, Ben. I'm going to ask you three things. I think I'm going to start with this one. You spoke about blind spots. You spoke about blank spots. That was a new one for me. I really like this. And resistance. And you spoke about distortion as well. A good friend of mine, Stephen Shedleski, has a saying that it is very difficult to read the label from inside the jar. How much do you think coaching is about getting that coachee to get themselves out of the jar and use second and third loop thinking to look at that jar from the outside and to see themselves in the world in a different way?
Good. That's a question that is flawed in many ways.
Sure.
What I would like to reframe that is more on, because that question implies the full responsibility on the coach to own the outcome of the results, which I would not want to advocate that position. From a practitioner perspective, or any doctors who are doing an operations, they can only say that I would like to emphasize on, or I would like to place my emphasis on increasing the possibility of success, but not certainly guarantee the results or the outcome. So it is a fact of matter that it is difficult for people to see something, for the label from inside the jar. That is difficult. What I would advocate is that the questions need to be framed in, so what are the possibilities for me to increase the chances of success here? And therefore, it forces me, therefore, to investigate what are components that might be useful for me to create in the process to increase the likelihood of that outcome. And henceforth, that's where the frame of reference or the framing of what looks like the label is critical here for the client. The more that they can access to the visibility of something that is difficult to see, the higher is the chances of them to be able to make sense of that label. And I think that's so much that I would say to remove the pressure point from the coach, that they have to own the result of the process, but they actually are responsible for the process, but not the result. So that's where, literally we have to split the hair very carefully.
Really good, Ben. So master of the process, enabling that safe environment where the person can explore that themselves. Really good. And that self-discovery. Lovely answer. I really like that. Next one I want to talk about is bias. And bias can come in all kinds of ways. But you spoke about the freeze time. And I really like that idea where someone was going back to a time where everything was great or whatever the case may be. And they're looking backwards a little bit. And you spoke about looking at their perspectives there. Where my question is, where does confirmation bias come in? So when you have a client who is only seeing the things that confirm their existing beliefs, and those beliefs might be limiting beliefs, they might be negative beliefs, in fact, in some cases. So when you have a client that is stuck, they're stuck looking and only hearing what they want to hear, or only hearing what confirms what they already know or believe. How do you get them unstuck?
I don't have a methodology, but I have a science to explain, and that science will inform how I will create the process. So part of the answer lies in the freeze the moment. And that's where cognitive psychology is not compatible. That's where cognitive psychology has their language and quantum physics has their language. Whether the two are the same, we cannot, it's not the point here. From a quantum physics point of view, every segment is a moment in time. Is the arrow moving? No, the arrow is not moving. The arrow is standing still in every moment, but it looks like it's moving, right? If we can freeze the time, nothing actually moves. It stands still. And when things stand still, biases freezes its loses its gap on on that moment itself. And that is number one. We had to freeze the moment. Once the moment is freezed, it gives us the possibility or the opportunity to invite people to step out and relook at the existing configurations. And by using accurate diagnosis in terms of how they are processing it, we are able to then offer, our observation on what possibly is not true or is true, and invite. The key here is to invite people to have a look. Janet Harvey recently spoke about judgment is the key to change, which makes a lot of sense. We should not be afraid of judgment, and that's where the conventional way of looking at bias is the same. Let's run away from biases because they are just biases. Whereas Janet Harvey was advocating, hey, biases is the same like judgment, where people refrain from it. But if we can just step out and use that as an opportunity, in her language, invite change to come into you. Okay, because all judgments or biases arises from a point of reference. And the question is, if we can freeze that moment, and if things are not continuity, they are just but set moments of time. And that's how thought is. They are just a spectrum. And if we can freeze it in that moment, we can calibrate the distorted frame of reference.
Yeah.
And that's where learning theories are very powerful, where it talks about perspective and the different type of perspective distortions. Now, if we can see that happening in the moment, we can actually help our clients to adjust that particular frames of reference. Now, once the frame of reference is being adjusted, then when you let it run real time, then everything goes in a different sequence. So my question to that question is, number one, we need to have a healthy outlook first, that as much as it is a bias, just like Janet Harvey was advocating in her recent work, judgment is the key. And I would just use bias is the key towards creating powerful change. If we can freeze, which is not her language, is CMA language of freezing the moment. If we can freeze the moments and invite people to learn something about the construct of that frame.
Yeah. Yeah, really powerful, Ben, and it's starting to really gel with me as well here. So the things that I'm hearing about this, well, first of all, everyone is biased, and understanding that bias is a normal and natural thing is an important step. What you do with that bias can be either positive or negative, but accepting that bias exists is actually an important step. And then what I'm hearing from you is this freezing of time, and then getting the client, or giving the space for the client to have a look at it from different perspectives, can help identify some of those blind spots, some of those blank spots, some of those areas of resistance, and to address if there is a distortion of perspective. Yeah, really powerful. All right, one more for me, and I encourage people, please start raising your hands now, or popping questions.
Please help me. Please ask some questions. My question is very difficult to question.
Otherwise, it's going to be grilled by me for hours, right? Okay, now you had this beautiful chart around generative change and generative capacity, and I'm going to go back to something that Joe Lanigan taught us, which was about the dance. That coaching is about a dance, and it's about creating this environment. And I'm wondering if that is the art, So there's a science, but the art is in the dance. And I think about things like surfing. I love surfing, Ben. I'm not good at surfing, but I love surfing. And a surfer does not curse waves, right? And a surfer cannot create their thing of beauty without the wave, and the wave without a surfer does not also have that thing of beauty. So what I'm wondering is, on your chart, if I may challenge you for a moment, to go, is that next step? And I'm delving into theory U from Otto Scharmer here as well, which you referenced. Is that next step co-creation? So it's not creation, but it's co-creation. And does that co-creation happen in the coaching environment, or does it happen when the person leaves the room or leaves the coaching call and they're now out there with new perspectives and new thinking, and they're able to hold space for other people? So in other words, the impact of the coaching doesn't stop when the coaching call finishes. The impact of the coaching goes on long after, when they go back to their workplace, back to their family, back to wherever they are, and they are now in a mindset where they're ready to hold space for other people and co-create something of beauty.
Wow. I'm going to invite you later to share some thoughts about, but my response to you is, I'm going to use an analogy of a caterpillar emerging from a cocoon in which it is a butterfly. And in that stage of the time, the butterfly that is newly formed has to spread out his wings so that the blood vessels will circulate and make the wings strong before it can take off. This is similar what happens in a coaching conversation. Sometimes the entire transformations that needs to occurs in that conversation itself, where the wings hardened and the client is able to take off. But the story continues when the clients take off. But there are moments in the conversation in which it is struggling to break through the cocoon. And we need to give grace. I will use the word grace for that to happen, because no one can control or manipulate the mind of another person. The mind is free on its own to decide the time in which things emerge. If you control what is emergent, then that's not called emergent. It's called anticipation. And if it's any based on anticipation, then that is falling short of the beautiful dance that can be created in the moment. So if we believe that things could occur in the moment, we also need to believe that in this very moment, what is needed for this moment is for the butterfly to just have the struggle. And we just give grace for the clients to sit with that, to say, hey, that's okay. That, that you begin to see something, but it's not fully formed yet. But I'm so happy to see a butterfly coming out of the cocoon. Just stay with that. Just stay with that. Our ability to encourage the formation, the crystallizations, the solidifying of that emergence is as important as the butterfly taking off. Understanding that a thought process is a very complex system that needs a lot of structures, emotions and things to come in place. Joe, do you want to add some comments to my wonderful questions?
Just regarding the dance, I think when we talk about the dance, if we as the coach are trying to do the samba and the client is trying to do the cha-cha, the dance is going to be very shaky. And we as coaches have to follow our client's agenda and not try and change. And also not accept where they're at and try and get them to a place, as you were just saying, Ben, that they may not be ready to get to.
Yes.
So we need to accept where they're at.
Beautiful. Yeah. And that's where the art of coaching comes in. When you say no, that's the right answer. When you say I'm not ready, that's the right answer. Right? Because if not, otherwise you'll fall short of the entire concept of emergence.
Very good. So meeting the client where they're at, understanding where they're at, and then giving them the environment and the process that enables them to take those steps, but to do so at their own pace.
And all we need to worry is to make sure that the caterpillar eat enough to spin the cocoon and get inside the cocoon and stay protected during this entire stage. That's what I'm responsible for.
And a beautiful metaphor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ben.
Mike, Louise raised her hand.
Yeah, we've got a few now. We had Jen first, so I'd like to go to Jen. You had your hand up first. If you still got your question handy, and then Louise. So Jennifer. Oh, you're on mute, please.
Can you hear me?
Can now. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks, Ben, and thanks, Mick. That was really, really thought-provoking what you're saying. What I was coming back was to the metaphor of the caterpillar and the butterfly. And I think coming back to your comments on change, I think some of the issues we face as coaches is that our clients don't realize they're actually going to be butterflies.
Yeah, that's true.
So a lot of when you talk about change and the perception of change starts with them realizing that how they look into that mirror, their own self-judgment of who they are.
Yes.
You've got to start there, because that change comes with the acceptance of vulnerability, because all our clients come into us for solutions. Right? It's not about where I need to change, but I have problems. They're the issues. And I think one of the biggest challenges that we learn moving from core to advanced is the fact that we actually need to get in that dance, maybe trip over their feet while we're at it, but to actually get into the rhythm where we can ease them across in a way that they're comfortable, that they're willing to change their aspect and face vulnerability. Because there's a lot of vulnerability there.
Yes, agree.
And they don't realize they're butterflies.
Precisely.
So I really enjoyed that. So as I was listening to that and I was thinking about it, and I was thinking my own journey with you. Okay, I don't know about this caterpillar or butterfly bit, a bit of a black moth still here. But it's just that part of the vulnerability of change comes from within, and it's within to then change the way we look at our external circumstances. And then we perhaps flick out a wing and start feeling our way around. But thank you very much. That was just my 2 cents worth.
Thank you, Jennifer, for emphasizing that's why science cannot divorce itself from the art. Right. Science cannot divorce itself from the art. And what you're referring to are basically the art of coaching, where the coach practice compassionate, coaching of acceptance, appreciations, and not insisting that this is how I need to do the process. So, so that's where the two can meet powerfully together. Thank you, Jennifer.
A powerful takeaway for today, Ben. And I'll just add a couple of things there to Jen and say that's where some of those limiting beliefs and maybe even imposter syndrome can come in for our clients. And the other thing is that a lot of people think that people are scared of change.
Yes.
That's not true. They're scared of being changed. They don't like being changed. They're happy when they're holding the steering wheel of their life. Another session. All right, Louise, please. I can't wait for this question. You always have wonderful questions.
No, it's not a question. It's an analogy. I mean, I was thinking about the dancing metaphor. The one Joe picked up, that if the client is dancing a twist and we are dancing a valser, it doesn't really work out. So I was just thinking, could it be an analogy that CMA is the dancing academy? We learn dance, different kind of that, because I mean, I was thinking, I'm in front of a client. If I don't know how to twist, how am I going to twist? I mean, I cannot learn on the spot, right? So I learned to twist with the technique, with the science, with Ben and the academy. And then when I'm in front of the client, every client will twist in a different way, right?
Yes.
And there is the art then, to be able, to follow the client. Is it correct what I'm just...
I think so. That's a beautiful... But I want to be more than just a dance academy. We want to be an art academy, where we embrace all forms of arts, including, dramas and writings and paintings and music and whatever that is.
This could be the birth of the new marketing campaign for CMA. There we go. All right, thank you. We did have a raised hand from Elizabeth. Elizabeth, are you still with us? I can't see on the screen, but earlier on you did raise your hand. Okay, I think it may have been someone that raised their hand and then had to drop. And I apologize.
I'm so sorry to interrupt. So I think time is coming to the end. Should I show the Mentimeters? And there's a lot of great input.
Yeah,
and then thereafter we can quickly wrap it out. And then because I've got an 8 o'clock session. So
Perfect.
will you be kind enough to read for us some of the takeaway that our participants had for today?
Yeah, thank you, Ben. And thank you everyone for participating in the Mentimeter. Finding the sweet spot. Yeah, I like that one as well. Many good insights into being in the client's mind, understanding their story. The way Ben explained the change, never looked at the concept of newness and creativity. So that graph there was really interesting. The posture of lifelong learning, absolutely. Yeah. The focus on my own learning and authentically serving my clients, trusting who they are and how they show up. And it's important to make note of what they are paying attention to. Yeah. And the stuck or standing still. I know a lot of people commented on that in the chat as well, Ben. So I do know we're at time. So thank you so much to everyone that put in the Mentimeter. Give one more round of applause to Dr. Ben. Actually, let's give him a high five. He always does that.
High five.
Give him a high five. And I'd like to also mention to you that there's a full week of programs here for International Coaching Week, and CMA's theme is about coaching works, right? So we're going to hear all about why and how it works, right? So many faculty are doing presentations. As a day is later today, doing a session that with Andrea, and it's all about change as well, in fact. So that would be definitely one to catch. Don't forget the live coaching sessions so that you can see it live for your own eyes and see that transformation before your very eyes and see how the coach plays that dance. And Joe is one of those ones that's doing a live coaching demonstration this week. Got Jacques tomorrow at 3 o'clock talking about the power of silence. I can't wait for that one. I've had a sneak peek at his presentation. It's amazing. So please enjoy International Coaching Week. Please explore what coaching is all about, what it can do for you, what it can do for your organizations. Coaching is life-changing. It's life-changing for your coachees, and it's life-changing for you as a coach. Enjoy.
Thank you so very much.